If you're struggling with consistency in your jump shot, I can pretty much guarantee that you're making one of these 3 mistakes, if not all of them. I'm Ryan Jones from ILB Elite. I shot 46% from 3 my senior year of high school and won Gatorade Player of the Year in my state. Let's fix your jump shot. All right, so the first and probably the most common mistake that I see with a lot of shooters, especially younger shooters, is having an excessive thumb flick. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. There are people like Kyrie Irving, Reggie Miller, who are elite shooters and they have a thumb flick. So if you are an elite shooter and you are the best shooter on your team using a thumb flick, by all means, don't change that at all. But if you look around the league, if you look around college, the vast majority of the best shooters don't have a thumb flick at all. They're just using their hand as a guide. Now, one more thing I need to discuss as far as a thumb flick and whether or not you should change it. There's a difference between having a thumb flick and a thumb tuck, okay? So what I mean by that, if you go look at somebody's jump shot, Steph Curry does this at times. I've seen Darius Garland do this as well. As they go up for their shot, they're gonna leave their thumb on the ball until their hand completely releases, and they end up with their thumb like this at times, or even right here. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a bad thing. It's kind of just holding the ball on as long as possible until your shooting hand can take over, and it's not influencing your shot very much at all. But having a complete excessive thumb flick is when your hand is pushing really hard with this thumb and you end up turning this guide hand over completely. Now you have a little more of a two-handed shot, and that's just an added variable that can cause a lot of inconsistencies in your jump shot, as well as causing very weird spin when it comes off of your hand. All right, so when it comes to fixing your thumb flick, there's gonna be 4 progressions to getting your guide hand working the way we want it to, because we wanna keep that hand straight as much as possible and really just using it as a guide and not being excessive with your thumb flick. So the first step with this, I'm gonna go ahead and do one-hand form shooting. I'm gonna start here with the ball. I'm gonna go ahead and put my guide hand next to the ball and have it really close, but I'm not gonna actually put my hand on the ball. I wanna just mirror it all the way up. So as I bring the ball up here, I keep it close to the ball, and then I'm gonna go ahead and follow through and kind of keep my hand on the side all the way through my jump shot. All right, now for the second phase of this progression, we're gonna go ahead and put our guide hand on the side of the ball, but I'm gonna make sure to keep my hand open. I don't want any of my 5 fingers on the ball. It's really just gonna be on my palm here. So I start here, and very similar to the mirror, just my palm on the side of the ball, and I go up all the way through my shot, keeping my hand straight the entire time. All right, now for this third progression, I'm gonna go ahead and put my hand on the side of the ball, and I'm gonna go ahead and put these 4 fingers on the ball this time, but keeping that thumb off. So same concept here, 4 fingers on, I go up into my shot, and then I let that hand come off and keep it straight the entire way. All right, so now for this 4th progression, I'm gonna go ahead and put my guide hand on normal, all 5 fingers on the ball. But let's make sure, it's very important in this process, any sort of shot change that you're gonna do, that you start very close to the basket. Make sure you find a good rhythm and make sure it's very repeatable and it's something that's consistent before you start moving out. Because if you wanna change your shot, it's a very long process and you can't start by taking step back NBA threes. All right, so let's start very close. Hand on the ball here, let's make sure we're working on the same things, keeping this hand straight. Let's not turn over and let's not thumb flick. All right, so this second mistake is extremely common, especially with a lot of kids that I train. It's having a lack of balance, okay? So most people don't realize that they have this issue. They think that a lack of balance, they gotta be fading extremely away from the basket to have a lack of balance. That's actually not correct, okay? So when we talk about having proper balance, something that Steph Curry's trainer harped on very much with his workouts is when Steph shoots the ball, whether you're a 10 toes to the rim shooter or you're slightly a tilt shooter, you wanna make sure that your gravity and your weight is centered in between your arches. So if I'm leaning too much over to one side or I'm jumping slightly over to the side, that's gonna cause a lot of inconsistencies. So if I'm leaning right, you can expect that that ball is probably gonna go right as well, or that I'm gonna compensate with my upper body. And there's no way you can be an elite consistent shooter if you're consistently jumping to the side or off balance with your shot. So here are a couple of drills that you can do to work on your balance. There's some that NBA players do as well. You probably watch a lot of their warm-ups when they're getting ready for their games. They seem very unorthodox, but there's a method to the madness because they're really working on their balance, and that's key, absolutely key for being a great shooter. All right, so this first balance drill, we're gonna focus on our balance, working 1 foot at a time. The first time you do this, you'll probably notice that you're jumping dramatically to the side with either one of your feet, and this is how we can correct it 1 step at a time. So I'm gonna start here on one leg. I'm gonna go ahead and bound over to the right and then back left. That doesn't have to be a huge bound. I'm gonna make sure I find my balance here first and I'm not wobbling too much to one side. And then I'm gonna go and take a jump shot, jumping off this one leg just a few inches off the ground. And I'm gonna try to be up and down in the same spot as much as possible. All right, so for the second balance drill, this is one that I see Steph Curry doing a bunch in his workouts. I'm gonna start here on 2 feet. I'm gonna go ahead and bound forward to one leg, and then I'm gonna jump pretty much straight backwards, landing on 2 feet at the same time, keeping my heels off the ground. And when I jump back here, let's try to make sure that we're balanced. Again, we have that gravity centered in between our arches, and then we bounce quick up off those balls of our feet, straight up and down in the same spot as much as possible. Before we get into this last shooting mistake, which is an absolute jump shot killer, if this video has helped you, make sure you like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our ILB Elite content, and go ahead and drop a comment down below and let us know what you want to see next. So the third mistake that I see with a lot of shooters is having a very lazy wrist or an unloaded wrist. Okay, so when I talk about having a loaded wrist, this is a lazy wrist. Now when I cock this wrist back, it is now loaded. So if I have a loaded wrist, all great shooters, whether they load their wrist early or they load it on the way up, you gotta make sure you get your wrist loaded because that's when I'm underneath the ball. So I personally would recommend that you have your wrist loaded early just because it's not an extra motion, but players like Trae Young go ahead and load it during their shot. But once I get my wrist loaded, now when I bring the ball up, this wrist doesn't change, this wrist angle doesn't change at all here, and I'm underneath the ball, and now it's very easy for me to push through this elbow.